Welcome to the Tech Data World podcast, the independent voice in aerospace, defense, and space technical information, covering all the news, reviews, gossip, opinion, software, standards, and specifications in the information production and deployment field.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of the TDW podcast. Now, those of you who are listening on our podcast channel, hello and welcome. And I know there's a stack of you now, but again, there's some of you that like to watch this through our video channels. So again, we are recording this and we will place this up onto our YouTube channel. So hopefully you will get the benefit of accessing this regardless of whichever medium you like to listen to us on. So as I mentioned, episode 6, can't believe it, we are rocking through these topics and subjects that we are producing for our podcast. And first and foremost, thank you very much to everybody that is sending in your comments, those of you who are being very positive around what we are trying to achieve here at TDW. But let's talk about the podcast. What is it we're going to talk about in this particular episode? Well, episode 6 is all about metrics. I want to talk about metrics, and this is a continuation of our last podcast. And if you didn't listen to our last podcast, I talked about ROI. I talked about technical information and the ROI that it has on an organization, or the ROI that it can deliver, both direct and both indirect. So I talked about the direct kind of dollar contribution to an organization, and I talked about the indirect spares, parts, training, customer support contracts, those kind of things that it can deliver if it's used correctly and we have a good strategy around our technical information. So that was our last and previous podcast, but of course none of that can be possible unless we actually capture metrics. And what I mean by capturing metrics is that we have to measure what we do, because if we measure what we do, we can then measure success, we can measure failure, we can see where there are gaps. And this is true for technical information and technical documentation and support information. And, you know, if you go and look at any large organization today, they are capturing metrics all over the place. NHS here in the UK captures metrics around waiting times, around, you know, how often a person comes in, you know, the metrics of how often a person comes in, that might show that they're a vulnerable person, those kind of things. And they can make decisions around those metrics and what the metrics tell them. Now, a lot of you are today capturing metrics in your organization, especially if you are outsourcing your technical information production. By that, I mean you are probably saying that, you know, if a document, a CMM or a set of data modules or the non-standard based document comes in from our supplier and it conforms to, and we can say that we give it a grading of 95 to 98%, that's accepted and you can pay the contract. I'm not talking about those kind of metrics, those metrics that you are measuring your suppliers and you're measuring those that enable you to deliver your technical content. We're seeing more and more now that organizations are measuring metrics around software that they acquire. And this is because the software that we use in our market can be extremely complex. It has to support complex standards and specifications. It has to support complex deployment methods. So it's inevitable that, you know, this software may fail from time to time. It may have a bug from time to time. But what we're seeing now is that lots of organizations are capturing those metrics for when the software or the component of software is actually stopping them from doing their job. That means at the end of the year, when the time is up to renew a support and maintenance contract, you can go, well, actually, look, we lost X man hours because you couldn't give us a fix for ABC, or you didn't answer us for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, which lost us this time. What are you going to do about it? And I'm seeing more and more now that technical publications organizations are doing that, and they're capturing those metrics, and that means that they have something that they can demonstrate where there has been some serious harm done to the production schedule of information. Now, conversely, it can also show that how more efficient you're being. You might need to demonstrate to your organization that $10 you invested in a CSDB has actually delivered $50 of ROI. And, you can't do that unless you don't capture metrics. If you don't show that, a data module used to take us 2 hours to produce and now it's only taking us 20 minutes, those kind of metrics. I want to talk about the type of metrics from an end user's perspective. How do we know we are actually delivering and producing stuff that our end user wants, needs, can, and has to use? How do we know that it's actually enhancing their engineering day? How do we know that we're writing technical manuals and they're never being used? Are we producing technical manuals yet we're still receiving customer support requests that these technical manuals are supposed to be answering? Let me give you a great example. And somebody told me recently that try and keep the podcast to telling stories. Now, in a Jackanory sense, if those of you are from the 80s and the 90s know what Jackanory is, we recently purchased some software here at TDW for something that we plan to do for this market, and we are going to we're in the process of developing something, and part of that development was we thought we would buy some third-party software rather than have my guys spend time learning and developing stuff. It would be easier to us to go and buy a COTS piece of software. So I had Claire sign the check and we went off and we purchased this software. Now, we bought it specifically for one component that it had within this software that's going to add value to you eventually when we launch it. And the problem is that the user guide was very, very comprehensive. But the moment we got to the point where we wanted to configure the component that we needed to configure, it just had a lovely title saying this is for this component and no instructions, no links to anywhere else, no taking us to videos, no taking us to a customer support portal, not saying go and read this instead of this. There was just nothing. And so we spent an hour or so just, looking at the component and trying to think at how could it work? How would it work? And, how would we, if we developed this, how would it work? And we just couldn't get it to work. So I then asked Jamie here to go and, get in touch with the customer support team, tell them that we're having problems. And, and it turns out that the instruction was super simple. It's just we were looking at a preferences section in a wrong part of the software, and there was another part of the software that this should have been configured. Now, that took a few hours of us losing time and them us waiting for them to get back to us, and them coming taking their guys offline to do whatever they were doing to answer our questions. And we probably lost a day and a half of this. Now, if they'd have made that information available in their user guide, then we wouldn't have bothered them. We wouldn't have lost that day and a half, and we could have carried on doing what it is we need to do. So, being who I am, I said, ask them, are they going to update the user guide? And the answer was possibly in the future. Now, I can't believe for a moment we're the only people that ever wanted to use this piece of the software as a whole. And, I guess that they probably, even if they had just a knowledge base that said, yeah, this is where you need to go and have a look at this knowledge base item. Now, rather cleverly, what they're trying to do, of course, is their immediate customer support response was, if you would like us to configure it for you, here is our hourly rate. Now, I don't want to do that. I just want a user guide that helps me configure it myself. And anyway, there's the story in a la Jackanory. So what I wanted to say is there are kind of, in my view, and I know there's lots of you out there capturing metrics to a certain degree and to a certain level. And I'm not talking about those production metrics, as I said before. I'm talking about those end user metrics. Now, if you are not, let's talk about some of the very basic things that you can do for your kind of metrics driven decision making, as I like to call it, is that if you're not surveying your customers, as in you are not asking them, we delivered you this content. Has it helped you? Is it what you expect? Is it the quality? Is it the depth you expect? Is it the clarity that you expect? Is the supporting graphical illustrations and those kind of things suitable? Are you getting the value out of the information? If you're not asking those questions, and I know that most organizations now will do periodic and regular surveys of their end users and say, we're trying to make you more productive and make you successful. And I've got a podcast coming up in a few episodes time on those that win are those that make their customers successful. And so if you're not doing that, then how can you make any investment decisions around where you need to improve, where you need to be putting the energy and the effort into your information? So, and that can be basic telephone interviews, that can be simple forms that you send people, or it can be an online. There is a raft of free tools out there right now that you can use for surveying, and or if they're not free, they're low cost. And so you should at the very least be surveying your users to gain a kind of feedback on the content that you're producing. A great example of this is if you go to any website right now, whether that's Amazon, whether that's Microsoft, whether it's Adobe is another great example. If you go to any of their websites and you look for help, and you have the context search now, context sensitive search, and up come all the articles. Remember, these are all produced by content creators like you and I. And at the end of any support kind of journey through the information, it asks you to rate the content. Was this helpful? Yes, no. If not, please tell us why. If yes, how would you rate this information? And it's normally a star-based information. And if you give it 2 stars or less, it'll ask you for comments. If you give it 3 stars or more, it'll just say thank you very much. And what's that giving those organizations? Well, that's giving them immediate feedback on their content and how it's useful by the end user, and how the end user can engage with it, and how they can use it, and how they're being successful with it. And that means that they can make, based on just that very basic capturing of metrics, they can make decisions on whether it's an area they need to just let it lie, it's working, or do we need to invest some more time into this area? And, there's lots of other things that they do, and we'll talk about this in the future where, context sensitive, if you're in a part of a document, it'll say you may also be interested in this. This is the kind of stuff that we're seeing more organizations are wanting to move towards, and how they want to really enhance their end users' perspective of the information that they are accessing and using. So that is basic kind of information that you can glean from your users very, very quickly. Now, there are more advanced methods for accessing metrics. So you can capture things. If you're not capturing customer feedback in terms of, let's for want of a better word, fault reports or bug requests around the information that you are delivering, if you are not capturing information requests, as in new CMM requests or access to new information, where are they coming from? What kind of organizations are asking for it? Is it something we should be telling our sales guys about? Is it something we should be telling our compliance teams about? These kind of things, those kind of metrics are things that you should be capturing, because all of these metrics that you capture, the more information you have, the more metric driven business decisions you can make. You can go back to your organization and you can say, look, we've had, over the last 6 months, we've had X number of requests around this particular component, and the information we have produced is clearly not giving the user what they need. So which means it's indirectly affected customer support. Customer support has had to field all of these questions, which means that, if we invest X into this now, we are likely to see a significant reduction in the customer support calls coming into our organization. Conversely, if you are receiving lots of requests for new CMMs or new technical information access from your customer base, that might be a sales opportunity. You can say to your organization, look, over the last year, we've had 35 requests for this particular CMM, and we've passed it to sales, and sales has converted 35 of those into 60% sales, which has directly affected the top line of the business. There are obvious reasons why you need to be capturing metrics around your information, and there are lots of ways that you can do it in a very upfront way, and there are lots of, not clandestine, but there are lots of technological ways that you can do it as well. For example, if a user goes into an interactive manual and they go through a journey through that technical information manual, and you can track that journey. A lot of IETP vendors do that already. They do that because they say for audit trail purposes. So you can see that a user has accessed a warning or a caution, or they've ignored a warning or caution, or they've skipped a step, all those kind of things. There are obvious reasons we do that. But if we analyze, if a user is jumping around pieces of information, it might be that our information is not laid out as clearly as it could be, and we could maybe make it something that's a little bit more useful, a little bit more interesting. So as a follow-on from our ROI, because a number of you sent in very, very positive comments around that podcast, I wanted to say that you need to be capturing metrics. If you are not capturing metrics around your information, and whether that's kind of very rudimentary surveys and contacting and speaking to your customers and just gleaning some information, or whether that's counting up the times that you're receiving a change request to your information, right the way through to let's track what our users are doing. Now, of course, there are rules and regulations around tracking users, and that's only going to get more and more strict here in Europe with the I think the GDPR regulations that are coming into effect as from the 1st of May. But you can make it as part of your license agreement. You can make it as part of your use terms that we will be tracking what you do on our information, because we want to improve what we do with our information. So if you are not capturing metrics, how can you make business decisions? So that's why I'm saying make sure that you are capturing metrics. I'd be very interested to hear how you are indeed capturing metrics, or if you are not capturing metrics and you need more information on how to do that, then please get in touch with us. We'd be more than happy to send you some thoughts, some ideas that you can implement very, very quickly in terms of metric capturing and that kind of data analytics that we can do around our information, which would be super, super helpful to any organization that needs to look at where they're going to invest in information, where they're going to invest in customer success, which will be a future podcast. So episode 7, I am going to talk about, which will be week after next, I am going to be talking about the technical publications and the protection of intellectual property. Why? Because this is coming up more and more and more with the people that I speak to out there. How and what can we do to protect our intellectual property? But for now, that was episode number 6, and that was all about metrics, and I hope that you found, or you find, this type of information useful and helpful to your day. So until episode 7, speak to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the TDW podcast. Remember, you can keep your tech data skills current and relevant with a full TDIQ subscription. Visit www.techdataworld.com for more details. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for your next Tech Data World update. Until next time.